we've got our tagline at the top here. Yeah, not just because it's our tagline and it's the header for all of our presentations, but actually because this is meaningful to the topic that we're discussing today. Yeah, so we talk about putting the R for relationship back in CRM. You know, that's our tagline, and winning together. And that is very important for everybody to bear in mind when we're thinking about any of this emailing functionality, because this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to help our customers build relationships, personal relationships with prospects and customers. We're not trying to be a massive email marketing tool. Okay, so I have no doubt at all that one of the questions that I'll be asked as we go through and talking about that, my colleague John is standing by. So if you do have any questions at all, please post them as a question and he'll pick those up. And obviously I'll have a look at any that are left over when we get to the end of the session. Okay? So one of the questions that I'm sure will come up is whether there are limits on the number of emails that you can send using the email sequences. Because people find the 200 limit on mass emails, for example, to be constraining sometimes. Well, the answer is that no, there are no limits on the email sequences, but you need to still remember that we don't have our own mail server. You know, we're not trying to be MailChimp or something like that. So emails that you send go from your own domain, and the number of emails that you send are subject to the limits imposed by Microsoft or by Google, yeah, because that's obviously the mechanism that we connect to send those emails. So while for some of you it's going to be an unqualified hurrah that you're not limited to 200, it doesn't mean that all bets are off, I said, and it's because of this relationship element, this R in CRM, that you need to bear in mind, yeah, that we're not trying to be something else. We're trying to be a CRM system with some fantastic tools for keeping in touch with your prospects and your customers. So, email sequences, definitions of those, series, automatically sent, some predetermined criteria. And essentially what we're going to go through today is exactly that, you know, how we're going to actually set that up. But these are the things that you need to think about really before you even start inside of Pipeliner. You know, you need to be thinking about who are these emails going to? And that's the type of record. You're not restricted to leads or contacts, by the way. I just feel they're the most likely that you would choose, but you can use accounts, opportunities even. Yeah. When you're thinking about what, you know, who your audience is, who your targets are, you have to be able to apply some criteria in Pipeliner to give you that list. Otherwise, you're going to be randomly clicking a lot of people, which of course you can do beautifully for email sequences, in fact. But in general, you know, if you're planning, you need to be able to identify your specific audience, and you need to be able to translate that into Pipeliner. Okay. You're going to want to plan out your content in advance, and you're definitely going to want to be using email templates to do that, whether it's rich text, whether it's HTML, but you'll be planning those templates really before you even start to think about actually setting up your sequence. And as part of thinking about the content, you're going to be planning the schedule, yeah, because it's a sequence, a series of emails and tasks, in actual fact, in our sequences. So it's a schedule, planned set of emails and tasks, one following on from the previous one, depending on the schedule that you set up. And then you need to think about, well, what if something doesn't happen? Or something does happen? Like somebody unsubscribes. What should happen if that happens? Yeah. If you're sending it to leads, what should happen if a lead that you're sending this sort of marketing type messages to actually becomes qualified into an opportunity and then is being managed by sales? What should happen? Yeah. If they don't bother opening the first email, what should happen? That's the types of conditions that we're going to be looking at. And that also feeds into settings, so automatically unenrolling. And then we've got a few things in terms of time zones and so on. So these are just some examples. Yeah, I'm sure that already you can think of loads of different situations in your own business where you could use this sort of thing. Yeah, but these are just some of the ideas that came to me as I was thinking about the articles for the new release and so on. And they're, different. They touch on different types of audience, so we've perhaps got that marketing type feel here with leads. We've got an onboarding kind of customer success type feel. We've got right at the other end, when they've been a customer for a while and we're thinking about, renewals. And obviously subscription renewal is very appropriate to Pipeliner, but contracts in general, agreements, and even broader term, are relevant to lots of people. Yeah. And then, of course, pretty much all of us have something along these lines, events, webinars. And I'm going to choose this webinar one, since we are all in one together today. I'm going to choose this webinar follow-up, kind of idea as my example. More resources. Well, in the new release today, hopefully you've all seen the megaphone icon go red and you've clicked. That'll give you a summary of the new features. You can then jump through to our knowledge base. We've got a lovely YouTube playlist. We'll be following up this webinar today with those links for you to click on. And then obviously, just as we do for all of these add-on features, please contact your account manager in the first instance to discuss if you want to add it to your subscription. And if you don't know who that is, don't worry about it at all. Drop a quick email through to customersuccess@pipelinersales.com and we will help you out. Okay, so let's jump straight on in here. And I've got one of my test systems here, and I'm on the contacts page to start with. Okay. Why? Because we'd be thinking about our audience. And how you define an audience depends on lots of things. But of course, it does depend on having some information in the system. So if we open up, for example, we've got the ability to have lots of different fields on contacts, and this is normal. Here's one I prepared earlier. Yeah. And it's one that I know that, a number of customers use to reference whether somebody is going to be invited to something, whether they've been registered for something. And again, follow-up fields like this, which say whether they actually attended or not. There are lots of ways that this information could get into Pipeliner. Obviously, there's the idea of sending an email, your users, your account managers, for example, your sales reps, following up on that email, and then entering information directly. If they've been speaking to Denise and they know that she's going to register, maybe they tick the box. Yeah. Equally, of course, there's all ideas from that manual entry right into automation. Yeah, so I haven't actually done anything here, but just as an example to show you, this is just Zapier. And the idea perhaps of linking Zoom with Pipeliner and automatically updating a contact when someone registers for a webinar. And then, of course, there's our API. There's all sorts of ways that information can get into Pipeliner to allow you then to define your audience. And then it's just a case of filtering. One of those standard skill sets from Pipeliner. If I go to my webinar invitations, then in my filter, I'm just going to say I set that up. So now I need to do my webinar field. There we go. And then you'd just be saying, well, who's coming? Yeah, who's registered for it? Got your filtered list there. That's your audience. All that's in place. Now let's think about content. So you're going to be using email templates really to set that up. And again, here are a few that I set up earlier. Yeah, and so we're all familiar with this idea of we invite somebody to something. Okay, so here's our invite. Note that my filter wasn't about invitations, it was about registrations. Yeah, so I'm sort of kind of thinking in my head that the invitation is going to be a lot broader, and then followed up by our account managers. Okay, and then we've got one here which is the follow up to that registration. This is the one that we're going to include as the first step for our sequence. Okay, so thanks for registering. And then we're going to have another one which is going to be sent out to people who attend. Now, again, really, would I kind of use a different sequence for this in real life? Yeah, probably. There's all sorts of complexities to all of this sort of thing, as we all know. Yeah. But just for the ease here, I'm just sort of pretending that they all follow on to the same guys, that everyone who registered is going to attend. Okay. I did just want, while I'm here, yeah, just using this one, to be able to show you a new feature from the new release. Yeah, just because it's appropriate to the content of this email, which is a survey, yeah, a feedback survey after the webinar, sort of thing that anyone who does any event like this is going to be just doing pretty much as standard. I've made up a link here, but I did just want to show you that it is now possible to actually personalize links. So if you've got a personalized survey that's based on somebody's email address, for example, then you can actually now use that, and it would be on the contact. So you can actually have your link set up, and then you can personalize that whole link, for example, with their email address, and save. And then when each individual user clicks on it, they're going to go to their own personalized survey. Pretty cool. Just one of the things that you'll find in the various improvement section of the release. I'd say just appropriate to show it to you with this content, but a nice little feature nonetheless, particularly for this idea of, surveys and follow-ups. Okay, so we've thought about our audience, we've got that in place, we know we can identify them, we've got the right criteria in Pipeliner to allow us to do that, if that's the way we're going to go. We can obviously also just pick people and enroll them, which is the terminology that we use, into the sequence when we've set it up. So let's go there next. Okay, so I've got my plates. Here's our email sequences tab. You need to know how to get there. It's from Tools and Email Sequences. And I've got it here because I've got a nice filter on for just mine. And here are a few that I created earlier, and we'll have a look at a couple of these because they're useful examples of the settings. And one of them I've actually sent some emails, so we can have a look at the statistics. But if we're creating a new one, we're just going to give it a name. For those of you familiar with using Automatizer, this is going to be a very comfortable experience for you because it's the same. Everything, we try and make everything in Pipeliner so consistent. Once you can do one thing in one place, you can do it in, everywhere else. And that's the same even with these, what you might think of as more advanced tools. We try and make them as easy to use and as consistent as we can. So it's the same kind of choice here with the sequence that you'd make with a process, which is, does it just belong to you? Is it only yours and only you can see it and use it? Or is it for everybody to use across the whole of Pipeliner? Yeah, and this one's going to be a space one because it's not just my webinar, everybody's going to be playing. Put in a nice description where you can, it just makes it a lot easier. You don't have to dive into each one to remember what it does if you put in a nice text description there. And here we go. So first look for vast majority of people. Here's where you need to have made your decisions about your audience. Yeah, so if I click here, you're going to know in advance what it is in Pipeliner terminology that you're sending it to. Yeah, and here's the contact and lead that might be the most used, but as I said, everything else is there, including projects. But I'm going to choose contact just because that's what I've got it all set up for. And then you choose which field you're sending it to. And of course, primary email is the obvious candidate here, but just be aware of your choices. Yeah? If you choose leads, let's just note that, change your mind, everything goes, you have to start again. Now, generally, of course, we've got one just for the purposes of demonstration here, but leads don't intrinsically have email addresses on them. Leads are generally linked to contacts, and it's the contact that has the email address. So just note that it's extremely easy for you to select the main email address of the contact that the lead is linked to. It's right here. And then if you scroll down again, you've got, you could choose the email address for the account that the lead is linked to. Or you could create a custom email address on the lead, just remembering that it won't go forward to a contact if you subsequently create one. So you kind of probably go for that type of choice with leads. Okay, so back to contacts. See, that's my reset. I need my primary email. And then I start to build my sequence. So you click on the plus. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to send an email. It's going to go from my account. This is just one of my test spaces. If you have company email addresses set up, so info at, marketing at, support at, sales at, whatever you might have, you have company email set up. That's something that your admins do in the admin module. Then if I've got access to any company emails, I'd be able to select one of those rather than my own email account here. And you'll see that that primary email address that we chose is already embedded. Now, of course, all I need to do is I need to go and pick my template. So it's in my webinar folder, and we'll start with the registration follow-up. Okay, everything in, lovely, easy, super easy to do that. Click on save. So that's my first step. Obviously, for the first one, it's always going to be sent. And that's day one of our process, okay, of our sequence. So now we think about, well, what's going to happen next? And we might think, well, next thing that's going to happen is, and then we might send the attendee follow-up email. Okay, click and save. So let's think about that. We've got our first email in there. Could have been a task, remember, I just chose email. Okay, obviously you hover, you've got edit, you've got copy, you've got delete, the things that you'd expect. You can change your schedule here. Generally, you want this going when you enroll a recipient into the sequence, so that would be day one. But then you can think about these ones here. Okay, so if this is the thank you for registering, and we send that on day one, when might we want the follow-up to go? No, your choice, your schedule, your planning. You just click, and in here, it's basically on day, and I'm going to just choose day 5, for example. And then you go to your next thing. So I'm actually just going to choose a task this time, just to show you how it works. And now maybe we want them to, we want the account managers to call. So we put a call in. We fill in the things that we have to fill in, so subject line. Okay. Things that you can put in there. So you can put in due dates. You can say who is it's going to belong to, yeah, the person who is enrolling. You can link, so link to the contact. This is just the same as setting up tasks as part of an automatized process and using that personalization, for example. So maybe in here, you'd be putting, you'd always be putting it as the current date, for example. Maybe you want to set it for in progress. Maybe you want to use some personalization in the subject line where you might insert the contact's name, for example. All these things are possible. There's just the same skill set that you'd use in Automatizer, the same idea that you use when setting up your email templates in terms of sort of building a custom view of these things. And then you click on save. So maybe we want that call to be on day 9. I don't know. Yeah, these are all your choices. But what you can do is you can choose some conditions. And I did want to flag that up for you as just something to think about when you're testing this out in your own systems after today. So obviously the first one's always going to be sent. But then you can funnel down for subsequent actions. So let's say that we say, if it's not opened, yeah, or if not replied is probably more appropriate for this particular one. It's all just examples, though, of course. Yeah, so we're always sending this one, but we're only sending this one if they didn't reply to the first one. Yeah, that's what we're saying. So we think about that in terms of numbers. We might have 100 here, yeah, that we're enrolling into this sequence. For ease, let's just say that 50 of them reply and 50 of them don't. So here we would have 50 emails going out. And if this one is always, here we would have 50 tasks being planned. But of course, again, if we put in a condition here and say, well, if they don't reply to the second one, then we're actually going to pick up the phone and phone them, for example, then you might start with 100, 50 emails go out, 25 calls get planned, depending on the reply rate. Okay, so you just need to know that, depending on the conditional options that you choose, you're funneling down the numbers who will end up being included in your sequence. And of course, that's the sort of thing that you can see in the statistics report that it will show you. If these don't do it for you, well, good news is you can add a custom condition in here, and then you can filter on different types of field depending on whether it's a task or an email. Okay, so what do we do to save our sequence? You just publish it. And then just like with an automatizer process, you can publish it to save it, but not set it active. You can publish and activate. You can also run tests. Yeah, just be aware when it comes to testing, they're not always exactly like real life. Okay, so what I prefer to do actually is I prefer to add a contact, like a dummy contact, into Pipeliner that meets, my criteria, or where I manually enroll it, as I'm just about to do. And I use that for my testing rather than, running a test can be a little bit artificial. So I prefer sometimes to use a dummy contact. It's just a little bit more realistic. Okay, so let's publish and activate this one because it's test data. We don't have to worry too much. Up here, though, are the settings. We do need to think about those because this is kind of, when do we want, we've already said if they don't reply to the first, or if they haven't replied, then they're going forward. Yeah, and then if they haven't replied, they're going forward. So we're obviously excluding those who have replied here. Yeah, but equally, more broadly, if we had always and always, so we've got 100, 100, and 100, we can still use some of these settings to say, yeah, but if something happens, take that person out of this sequence, yeah, because then it's not appropriate for them to get the follow-ups. Yeah, all depends. But your options there are when they reply, and you can send an email, and you can compose it in the normal way. Thank you very much for your reply, blah. Yeah, you can create a task. This is for the person who enrolled this recipient, if it was enrolled by a person, or if it was enrolled by an automatizer process, which we're going to have a look at. It's the either the person who triggered that process or the owner of the record that triggered the process. It depends. It's a generic task that just mentions that this recipient has been unenrolled. You can also do the same when they unsubscribe. But here's the cool thing, which is when the custom condition is met. And I'm just going to publish this one to save it. And I'm going to go into my lead one here, where this makes more sense. So I'm just going to edit. You can see the settings here. So in this lead one, which I've sort of mimicked our trial process in actually, because it's very nice and it's got beautiful HTML emails in there, just to give you examples of that. And this is one where we want to send this one when someone signs up for a new pipeline trial. And we do always follow up on up until day 13, when the trial runs out on day 14. So we'd certainly want them to be out of this process if they unsubscribed. But also, this is one of those situations where if the lead that is there at the beginning of this sequence, which is going to be an open lead, if that lead is subsequently either qualified to become an opportunity or is archived as lost, we don't want to carry on sending these trial emails in those situations. So this is a great example of being able to use this custom condition, which hopefully makes sense to everybody. Time zone, this is your time zone. As a user, it's not the time zone that applies to the recipients. And then the days that you want to send it on, and a time range. And then just this final one, which is, does every new email basically get sent as a new email, or is it sort of bundled together like Gmail does? You can choose on that. I like the new conversation bit. And then obviously you would save your settings, and if you've made any changes, then you're going to publish. Okay, so easy, right? And it is. Really, like with most things in Pipeliner, the doing of it is really easy. If there's sort of thought to be put into it, it's always in the preparation. It's making sure you've got the right data on the records. It's thinking about your beautiful templates, etc. And then, of course, once you've got it running, you need to enroll recipients into it, and then you need to keep track of the reporting on it. Now, I can enroll manually from here. I can also get a list, a view of all of those people who are currently enrolled. And just like in Automatizer, I've got my activity logs, so I can look at it, and see what's going on. You can see clearly whether it was enrolled by an individual user or as part of an Automatizer process, which I'll show you in just a second. Okay. Now, I can type or paste email addresses into here, or click, and start looking for people. I'm generally not going to do that too often. I'll show you how it's more likely that you'll enroll people in just a second. Okay, but let's just have a quick look at the statistics. There's not a whole lot to show here because I am working with test data, and unfortunately dummy email addresses don't tend to reply when you send to them. But just to give you an idea of the glorious statistics that you'll be able to see when you're using this in real life. So we've got step statistics at the bottom, send you how many were sent, and then we've got the opens, clicks, etc. Dates that things ran. This is going to very clearly show you that funneling effect if you've got conditions. So it'll say the percentage that proceeded from step 1 through into step 2 on day 8, day 15, and so on. And then you've got your total enrollments at the top. And should you ever want or need to, you can reset all, you can change date ranges, or you can reset individual statistics. But it's all the usual sort of candidates here in terms of opens, clicks, replies, etc. Just making a quick note there, of course, particularly with things like replies. It's not enough for them just to reply to your email. That email needs to be captured into Pipeliner as an incoming email by the email integration for the server that you use, either Gmail or Office 365. It's not just a reply. It's a reply that's captured back into Pipeliner, because obviously otherwise Pipeliner can't see it and include it, in your metrics. Okay, so let's think about enrolling. So I could, got my filter here, very easily, select everyone in my filter. My email sequences button comes up. I can enroll, and away we go. Cool. That's just going to enroll all of those people, all those 7 records into my process. There we go. If I just do a quick refresh, which obviously in normal life I wouldn't have to do, but because I'm trying to show you things very quickly. So let's go to Denise, for example. Over here on the right-hand side, we've got another one of these lovely widgets. Yeah, like we have for Automatizer. We've now got a nice email sequences widget. And that tells you actually that Denise is enrolled in 2 sequences. That's the number here. Okay, here are sequences. I can enroll her manually if I'm chatting to Denise and she's interested in my webinar, yeah, or she says she's registered. To be more precise, I could enroll her manually in here. And if I go to enroll, then I can see which one she's currently enrolled in, and I can unenroll her from here. I can also unenroll en masse, should I want to, from the email sequences button. Yeah, so unenroll from everything from here. The final thing I just want to show you is about using Automatizer. So let's say, for example, that we did have some integration of some sort that is updating our contacts in Pipeliner for us to indicate that they have registered. Just remember, just to give you some ideas, possibly something like this. Yeah, possibly an API integration, possibly a form integration from our website. But one way or another, let's kind of say that, you know, information's getting back into Pipeliner for us. So we don't really need our users to be enrolling, even though it's super easy to enroll from a filter. And so you can include an email sequence as part of a process. Now, this is a very simple one where we've got contacts being updated. I've specified in here that it's the registered for webinar field that I'm interested in being changed. And then here in my condition, I'm saying this is the email sequences webinar, because we've got others, but this is the one that we're following up. And then here in my action, I haven't got it set up, so I now need to choose it. When that happens, when a contact is updated or is created with a tick in that webinar registration field, I can automatically enroll them here in my email sequence. I haven't gone into it because obviously this is our sort of first introduction. But of course, where Automatizer differs from sequences is in the complexity of the entire process that you can build in here. Yeah, so if you're really getting into many different branching conditions that should be enrolling into, you know, different sequences, perhaps A/B testing, you know, an idea of that, because, you know, again, maybe you would use something like that. Said, you know, particular webinar, not another webinar, whatever you can imagine. Yeah, if you can get the data, you can use it as your conditions, then you can then be enrolling into sequences if you've got both Automatizer and email sequences for your subscription, of course. And then, you know, doing lots of other things here. So sending notifications to people, yeah, which of course you wouldn't do from within a sequence. Sequences just send an email externally and then schedule a task for your users, pretty much, you know, very often as a follow-up on that email. So this is the ability to join the real complexity that you can get to really easily with Automatizer together with that, you know, that email sequence. Okay. I really hope that that has been a good introduction to you all to this fab new feature. Cliff, great question, but no, it's not going on a particular date. It's kind of, I was just using an example. I completely get your question. I was thinking that myself as I was doing it, like, duh, Liz, you know, you want it to go after the webinar date. The idea of these sequences, of course, is that you enroll people when they need to be enrolled, knowing that email 1 goes then and email 2 will always go day 5, whenever day 5 happens to be. So it's not about fixed dates, it's about the sequence. You know, they get this on day 1 and 5 days later they get this, and 7 days later a task is going to be scheduled for the account manager, and day 10 they're going to get a survey link, for example. It's much more about that scheduled planned sequence than being tied to individual dates. Anybody else got any questions at all? Mm.
Yeah, there's one in the chat, Liz. Somebody just saying, great functionality. I built a large part of this functionality in Automatizer.
And it is, and I mean, we've done it ourselves, John, haven't we? You know, with the trial process and whatever. Absolutely.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
it absolutely is possible to build this in Automatizer. You need to be putting a lot more values on records, though, to allow you to do that, because you need to be able to fix these emails on dates. When that's the glory of the sequence, you don't have to do that. You just have to know, I want this to go on day 1, and I want this one to go on day 5, and I want this one to go on day 10. And then there's nothing to worry about at all. You know, the only thing that you need to do after that is then just say, this person, so if I go back to my list here, this person right here, I want to enroll them in that sequence. Yeah, it's literally just fire and forget. Don't need to worry anything about any date when it happened or whatever. And that's the big difference between using Automatizer to do this and the sequences. It's just so perfectly formed to do exactly what it does. And, again, I think it does it really easily. It's intuitive, easy to set up, and you just set it running and it works. Alrighty, thank you very much for your time. As always, guys, really appreciate you joining us to find out about these new features that we've been adding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hopefully this has been useful, and do let us have your feedback.
Yeah, and it is part of the unlimited, but it can be added to your tier structure. So please talk to your account rep.
Absolutely. Okay, everybody have a good day, whether it's morning, afternoon, evening, probably somewhere. And I will hopefully see you all again in a couple of weeks for the next webinar. And please do let us have your feedback on what you'd like us to cover.